I don't want to look back tomorrow and regret that I didn't get to the end. I've really looked at those ups and downs, as we talked about, that it's temporary. And so you can push past those things to get to the end. So I think that's the beacon of hope that I have, is that by talking about it, by getting the message out there, we inspire one person. We've done a really tremendous thing.
In the pursuit of greatness, it's often the challenges we face that shape us into who we are. Today, we have the privilege of exploring the journey of Alan Parvis, founder of Go Faster Athletic. As a Marine, ultrarunner, and entrepreneur, Alan has dedicated his life to pushing limits, both in physical endurance and business innovation. His passion for performance and mental toughness shines through in everything he does, inspiring others to go faster, aim higher, and never settle for less. Alan's story is one of resilience and relentless pursuit, offering valuable lessons for anyone striving to achieve their best. Alan, thank you so much for joining me on the 1 Mile, 1 Veteran podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate you inviting me to be on.
Well, it's such a pleasure to have an ultra runner and innovator in the fitness industry on the podcast. And as our listeners begin tracking their walk with the Strava app, I'd love to dive right in talking about mental toughness and perseverance. They're key traits for athletes, entrepreneurs, and of course, my favorite, the Marines. In the face of challenges, setbacks, and the grind of daily life, how do you cultivate and strengthen these traits within yourself?
Well, that's a great question. I think what it boils down to for me is piecing things out into manageable chunks. So, I think a lot about long distance racing, challenges in life. If you focus on the end distance, the end goal, it's very daunting, right? It can seem overwhelming, but if you break that down into manageable pieces, it allows you to tackle those one by one. And so, if you equate that to a race, we're going to get to the next mile. We're going to get to the next hill. We're going to get to the next corner, whatever it is that gets you to the next point. And when you get there, you can reset, you can push, a little bit further rather than thinking about that big daunting goal that you have. So I think that's one thing. I think other thing that I remind myself is that it's an up and down journey. So there's going to be low points in a race. There's going to be low points in life. And you need to think about what's coming next, right? How do I push beyond that low point to get to the next high point? And the last piece that I think about is when I think about a race specifically, quitting is something that I have to live with forever, right? And so that pain that I'm dealing with in that moment, that temporary hard spot that I'm in, if I can push past that, I can get to the end. If I quit there, then tomorrow I'm going to regret it. And so I think about those small moments and what that means for the long term. And those are some of the things that I do to really push past those difficult points.
Those are really great lessons to carry with you. How did you go about developing? Was it before or after the Marines?
I was thinking about this a little bit from my childhood. I read this book. I actually can't find it anymore. The book was called Never Quit or something along those lines. It's a very telling title, right? You can tell what the premise of the book is. But it was really, it was not a very verbose book. It was a lot of inspirational pictures and quotes about, what it means not to quit and why you push beyond. And so I think from an early age, it was ingrained in me that you should push past these hard points and not quit. I didn't really think about that when I started running and I started doing these endurance races. I really focused on, I don't want to look back tomorrow and regret that I didn't get to the end. And so when I started, it was less about not quitting. It was more about, I just don't want to look back and say that I wasn't able to do this. But as I've run more and as I've done other things in life, I've really looked at these ups and downs, as we talked about, that it's temporary. And so you can push past those things to get to the end.
I love that never quit attitude being instilled in you since your childhood. That's definitely needed for military personnel as well as endurance athletes such as yourself. What had inspired you to join the Marine Corps in the first place?
So I'm going to go back to my childhood again. I actually can't tell you the moment that I decided I wanted to be a Marine. I can point out a couple points in my life, though. One, I had a Marine Corps recruiter come to my house when I was school aged. I don't know why he was there. I know that I wanted him there, but he was there. The poor guy, right now, I know he was just a poor PFC that was told to go to this poor kid's birthday party. And so I thought he was the coolest person ever. And so I would say that from an early age, I wanted to be in the Marines. I wanted to be in the Marines because I perceived them as the best, right? They were the most difficult branch. I wanted to do the best and the most difficult. And so that's why I chose them. But I think now, again, in hindsight, as I look at who I am, I'm a very giving person. I think service is really important, and so I think that I was really looking for a way to serve, and the military seemed like the best avenue for me to do that.
That's so funny that you can look back and you can see this larger than life Marine entering your house as a child. I remember one of the areas that we had lived in, it was right outside of Lejeune when I was in kindergarten. And two of the people that came to live with us were a couple of Marines. And one day after school, we hear this loud commotion outside the apartment. And it turned out there was a rattlesnake that was on the walking path. And I remember being in the living room, seeing this Marine jump up off the couch, out over the balcony on the second story of this apartment complex, go over there and grab the rattlesnake with his hand and clear the path for the kids. And just thinking about who that person was probably some 19-year-old kid that just wanted to live off a base and coming from a small town in America.
Absolutely. And when you look back on those things, you realize how young everyone is and how young you were, and the opportunities that were given in the military to do some pretty amazing things at such a young age is also really impactful.
Well, not to mention young. I mean, I know that you're still a young man and you're doing some great things, and the military service was a large part of your adulthood. What were some things while you were in the Marine Corps that really stand out that helped shape who you are today?
I would say that on a more general moment, it was these leadership opportunities. So I joined when I was 17, right out of high school. Literally the day of my graduation from high school, I walked across the stage and got picked up from dinner by the recruiter to go to boot camp. Like, I was signed and ready to go. And so I was able to do so many amazing things and so many amazing leadership opportunities at such an early age that today, when I look at my leadership style and the things that I do, it's all really from those experiences that I received early on, the leadership, mentorship, the guidance, and those opportunities. 18, 19 years old, I was the only Marine down in Nicaragua for a mission with a whole platoon of Army guys, and I was afforded the opportunity to lead the Marines that were rotating into that unit, and that was a lot of responsibility for an 18, 19-year-old. When I was deployed, overseas to Iraq and Afghanistan, early 20s, you're leading teams, and those opportunities, it's really foundational for the style of leadership that I have today. And I want to give those same opportunities to others. So I think that's one more general note. I think one of the specific things that happened for me is in Afghanistan, we were struck by an ID in one of the vehicles that we were in. And leading up to that, I want to set a little bit of context. When we prepared to go over, we were doing training, right? We were going through activities that we were likely to encounter to make sure that we had the muscle memory. One of the things that we did was we went through drills, sprinting, applying tourniquets, applying aid. What are the 9 lines that you have to call? All of that preparation, was things that you hope you never had to deal with. But if the opportunity or the situation presented itself, you had to be ready to face that situation. So in that specific incident, we were struck by an IED. All of that training had paid off. All of those preparations that we did as a team allowed me to react the right way. And so we went through that preparation, the intention of the mission, and then the perseverance after the mission was really something that I took away. And I look back on it and I say, we have to prepare so that we're ready for these types of situations.
That story of combat, preparing for battle, is something that every service member does, and not everyone has the challenge of having to live through a firefight or an IED. But the preparation for it is so intense that we tend to carry those skills with such weight and gravity, especially when we're working on becoming a civilian. I know that that was a big challenge for a lot of my peers as well as myself, was how am I ever going to do something as important to me as preparing for war to make sure everybody gets home? So how did you go about navigating your preparation into civilian life following combat tours and intense leadership challenges?
So I think one thing that's unique about me, and we didn't mention this, is that I was in the reserves. So I joined the Marine Corps Reserves. I did, several deployments. So I was kind of operating between this, hey, let's prepare and deploy. Let's go back to civilian life. Let's prepare and deploy. Let's go back to civilian life. My last deployment to Afghanistan, where I was referencing this incident, I came back. I decided that I really needed to focus on going back to college, getting my education. Did that just go through?
Your son, I'm assuming?
I have 4 kids, so I have to look out the window and see which one it is.
That is awesome. So for our listeners, this is just part of those challenges of being an entrepreneur, working from home, running a business, and raising a family.
Yeah, and I will say, so before I get back into the answer, I apologize for that. It's like 6 o'clock right here. So, this is the witching hour. This is dinner. We're getting crazy before we get ready for bed. So that's what's happening. But getting back here, when I got back from Afghanistan, I decided it was time to hunker down, go to college full time. And that transition was difficult because I had just came from these really intense experiences. And now I was in my mid-20s going to college with a bunch of civilians that didn't have those same experiences. And so it was really difficult for me to relate to my peers in college, right? So I struggled with that. That I think is one of the reasons that I fell into running, because I started running these endurance races when I got back from Afghanistan. And I think for me, I found another community, right? I found another community of people that wanted to do crazy things, and I latched onto that. And so it wasn't until much later in life that I started to, transition away from that, the running community, started having a family. And, this is getting into a little bit more of a broad answer here, but, it wasn't until I got out of running, out of college, that I realized, the impact that physical health had on me. And so incorporating that physical fitness back into my life was really important. So circling back to your question around how to transition, it was something that was difficult for me because I didn't feel like I could relate. And, the one thing that I really cherished from the military was the relationships that I made. I still keep in contact with all the people that I served with. And those are bonds that you just can't forge in the civilian sector.
That's awesome. I'm trying to envision that because one of the visions that I've always had of reservist came from my second tour back in 2006, and I remember learning the amount of work that goes into being a reservist on deployment versus the amount of preparation that you actually get because you have responsibilities outside of the military. And you don't get as many benefits. You don't get as much medical benefits unless you're on duty. Your families don't get the same level of support that active duty is. Your life is essentially part-time military with full-time commitments during deployments. And I can just imagine what those challenges are is, hey, I was just in this austere environment and now I'm back in the classroom. Hey, I was just in this combat zone and now I'm back in the workplace. And yeah, you have your buddies from the reserve unit, but people that are seeing you on the day-to-day basis, you're still Alan. You're still the student. You're still the part-time worker. You're the guy that they have to make accommodations for because you're gone for 7 months and they have to maintain your job. How would you tell people that are thinking about becoming a reservist, either post-service or as their first time, what were some of those challenges for you, and what advice do you give to people now that would ask, hey, should I go reserves?
Well, I think you highlighted the differences, right? So I think, if you're looking at the reserves versus active duty, you have to understand what you're getting out of it and what your expectations are. So for me, I had a plan. My plan, which did not go according to plan. My plan, I was going to go to college. I was going to be in the reserves, and I was going to go to college. And when I got done college, I was going to be a pilot in the Marines. That was my plan. But the military had different plans. And I think you have to understand that if you're joining the reserves, it's good to have a plan, but you're signing up for a commitment to serve the military. And if the reserves get called up, you're going to go serve in a different capacity than maybe your plan. And we were activated a few times. Some that were quote unquote mandatory. Other ones you had the option to go. But you know how it is. You can't watch your friends. You can't watch your buddies go without you. So when your unit gets deployed, you're going with them because you can't stand to watch them go without you. So I think understanding the commitment is really a big piece, and making sure that aligns with what you're looking to get out of that opportunity. I think the other thing I would say is that for us, when we were reservists and we would go deploy with these other active duty units, of course there was some stigma associated with the reservists, and I think we took an intentional approach to show the value that we brought when we came and worked with a team. And so I think understanding perspective is really important. That applies to when you're in, but also when you get out, right? Your civilian peers don't have the same perspective. So you have to understand where they're approaching, their interaction with you. Same with the active duty. They don't have the same perspective. So what can you do to educate them on what you're bringing to the table, is the advice that I would give.
That's awesome. Thank you for that. Now I want to take it back to the running because you were mentioning, running was a big part of your life, and then you had stopped for a bit. You stepped away from running as much, and then came the realization, hey, this wasn't just a good physical exercise for me, but mentally, this was something that I needed to do. Is that part of what led you to start Go Faster, or what was the inspiration behind getting back into running and then eventually starting your apparel line?
So absolutely, they're connected. I would say that for the fitness journey, I started running when we got back from Afghanistan. We ran the Marine Corps Marathon as part of a team for a friend of ours that was killed in action. And that was my first exposure to the Marine Corps Marathon. I showed up to the Marine Corps Marathon woefully underprepared. Like, I was not ready to run a marathon. I should not have been there. But, I wasn't, again, not going to show up to the starting line without my buddies. And so we were all underprepared. We persevered through that. But I fell in love with the community. And so I started running after that, really competing races. But I would say that I was running to go to races. I was not running religiously to prepare. I wasn't going after personal records or anything like that. I just wanted to be around the community because I loved being around the races. I loved having opportunities to be with my Marine friends. So every time I would sign up for a race, we would rope everybody in and we would all show up to the starting line. So it was like a way to bring the band back together again at these races. So that's how I started getting into running. Flash forward, I, got through college. I started having kids and family, and life gets really busy, right? And so you don't have time to go to the races as much. I didn't have time to do the running and the physical fitness. And so I started to notice that as I got away from those things that brought me joy and the physical fitness routine that I had, as I started to deteriorate with my self-care and my mental health, I started to get angry. I didn't feel as good. I didn't feel as happy. And I started working out again around this time. And I noticed that when I worked out, I felt better. I was happier. I was, more confident with myself. And so for me, it was such a correlation between what I was doing for my physical health and how that tied to my mental health. So I'd say that's definitely one piece to the Go Faster story. The Go Faster story is three pieces. So product, brand, and mission. I wanted to create something that was differentiated. So I run. I run from my house, and I go from pavement to trail to gravel to fields, and then back to pavement. And so I wanted something that had that versatility there. In Afghanistan, when we were preparing for Operation Strike of the Sword, we were on base for a few weeks just waiting, right? And as we were waiting, we were just running on the gravel roads. And I had a single pair of road shoes. They just got trashed. My feet got trashed, the gravel roads beating up. And so I had these things in my mind where there was a product opportunity to create something that had that great road comfort and the durability to kind of go wherever you wanted to go. I thought that connected really well to the military and first responder community because we don't choose where we go, right? We have to go where we're needed, where we're called to serve. So I wanted to create a brand that connected to that. I'm not competing for glory. I'm not here chasing PRs like I mentioned earlier. I'm training so that when the time comes, I'm ready. And then the last piece is the mission. I want everyone else, I want to be able to tell my story about how physical health impacts mental health. On the front of the shoe, it says front toward enemy, because every day you lace up your shoes, it's a reminder to face whatever enemy is in front of you. I want the brand and the story of the shoes that we have to be a reflection of that ethos and a reminder to everybody out there.
That's awesome. And the mission that you have behind the brand is really inspiring. And you had said something that just had stuck into my mind about how you came to realize that working out and exercising was good for your mental health. And I think about the oxymoron of exercise for punishment that the military kind of starts out and sporting organizations start out. I've been a runner for some time, and I remember shirts that says my sport is your sport's punishment. And it's just it builds in this mentality so that when we do get out and our fitness drops off, we're going to have a natural correlation where our mental health will get worse because we're no longer doing the things. We have a negative connection associated with fitness.
Absolutely. I think another story that's funny, and I was reflecting on this recently, is in boot camp. They would tell you, be the one, right? Be the one to step out of line. Be the one that's different, right? But then when you get out, they want you to be the one that's speaking up, that's being a leader, that's showing courage, right? So it's an oxymoron, right? What you're trained versus what they actually want. It's another one of those things I remember.
It's wild. Well, you are currently being the one in a market that is very heavily saturated by big competitors, not just brands like Nike and Adidas and stuff like that, but you have the more niche brands like Salomon. Trail running shoes are another. Spartan, I think, even has their own brand. So what is creating a product in a saturated market been like for you?
So it's hard. I will say that it's very hard, and every day is different, and there's lots of ups and downs. Right? We correlate this to the running, just like we were talking about earlier. Not every day is easy, and every day is different, and you have to persevere through those ups and downs. I think about the reason I started it. Product, the brand, and the mission. Nobody can compete with that, right? And you can't fake that. Another brand can try to emulate what we're doing, but they can't fake the authenticity of what we want to do. So I think that gives us a strength. I think the other thing when I started this, I wanted to do something that was difficult that other people wouldn't do, because that's an opportunity to create something of value that that's actually going to be meaningful. So what I mean by that is we entered a market with lots of competitors, but there's nobody that has all those things that I mentioned. And so doing that is going to have staying power, and it's going to create something much more meaningful in the long term for us to be here.
That's really awesome. When I talk about that saturated market, my wife and I have been in the service industry since 2015, photo and video out here in Hawaii. We've primarily focused on the tourism industry as well as weddings and family. And they're out here in Hawaii. It's absolutely beautiful and a completely saturated market from the service industry. But there is always a way, because there's always an opportunity to solve problems. And it sounds like that's what you did with your product, is said, hey, there's a problem. Our shoes, especially for first responders, hybrid athletes, which is a rising trend in the athletic field, obstacle course racers, military members. We need multi-terrain. I mean, I have 3 pairs of shoes outside, a walking pair, a workout pair, and a trail running pair, as well as my road runners. I would love to have just one pair. How did you go about creating this product? Because I know how to make a service-based product. It's me, it's my time, it's, finding other service providers that I can network with. But for a product, I mean, it seems so unreachable as an everyday citizen to be able to create a new product.
Yeah, I think it's certainly difficult, but I think a couple things is when you look at the market, right? We looked at the market. We had this mission. I'm saying we at the time it was just me, but I had this mission that I wanted to do, and I looked at the market, and there was shoes that were meant to do both, but there wasn't a shoe that was great at being a road shoe and had the durability to go off road. Right, the hybrid shoes that were out there were just perceived as being bad road shoes and bad trail shoes. Right, so I wanted to create something that was a great road shoe so that if you wanted to go out off the trail, you could do that. And so, on the process of creating the shoe, one of the things that we did was we tested it at the Marine Corps 50K. So I personally laced up a pair of the prototypes last year and ran the Marine Corps 50K to show that they had the comfort to do an all-road 50K, which lives into the promise of the product. But the process to get here is your question. And one of the things that the Marine Corps teaches you and the military in general is that you don't go things alone, right? You're not on a one-man mission when you deploy. You have to find people that fill out your fire team, right? What are your strengths? Where do you need some support? And so the first thing that I did was I went and I cold contacted anybody that I could find that had any experience in designing footwear, making footwear, and I just talked to them about what I wanted to do, how I wanted the brand to be, how I wanted the product to be. And that's also early stage market research. Are you connecting with people? Do they hear what you're saying and what you're trying to create? And if you can get people to enlist in your cause, then I think you already have the start of what you think is a good company. So I would say that the first thing is making sure that you're building out your team and your skill sets that you don't have. That was one of the things that we did. The only other thing I'll say is that for me, I went to college for physics and engineering, so I have a background in making product. For me, that was part of in my wheelhouse, but I was not doing footwear at the time, so I wanted to build out that. For us right now, this is actually getting into the areas where I need to rely on more people. I need more support because marketing and sales is not my strength area. So making sure that I'm building out that team around me has been a focus area for us.
That's awesome. Well, I'm excited to see you at this year's Marine Corps Marathon, have the shoes in my hand, and potentially, hopefully, pick up a pair and try bringing them out here to Hawaii to run on some of the trails and runs that we have as I prep for more and more marathons. I know I got the Marine Corps Marathon in October, and then Honolulu Marathon. So maybe that'll be my Honolulu Marathon running pair of shoes. In your journey as an entrepreneur and going through this process, were there any other moments or experiences that have significantly shaped your perspective on leadership?
I think in my career as an engineer and an engineering leader, prior to this, I think focusing on what's most important is something that I've taken away from a lot of my experiences. So when you go new mission, new project, really focusing on what problem you're trying to solve and making sure that you're focusing on that specific thing is really important to everything. I would say the other, again, more general answer to this is that every day is a battle, right? Every day is different. It's going to be ups and downs, and you just have to persevere through those lows and the downs so that you can get to the next one and move on to better times.
As a leader and founder of your company, how do you go about motivating and inspiring others in the civilian sector?
I think one of the things that I want to do is be a role model to my kids that were running around and screaming here earlier. Is I want to show them what they're capable of, right? So everything that I've done in endurance racing is things that I never thought I would do. I never thought I would be capable of doing. And even when I was doing it, I was like, there's no way, but I'm just going to keep moving forward. And by the time you get to the end, you're done. And you realize that you can accomplish way more than you give yourself credit for. So I think for me, inspiration is with my kids and making sure that they know that they can accomplish anything that they really set out to. I think the other thing is military veterans and first responders that are maybe in similar situations to me, is that it's okay to talk about it. Number one, like I struggled to talk about for a long time all the things that I went through, and I honestly still struggle with that. But I think that there shouldn't be stigma around it. And we should be talking about it. We should be looking for ways to build each other up, inspire one another. And so that's why I started talking about it. That's why I created this. That's why I'm here talking with you, because I don't want anybody else to feel like they can't talk about it, because we should be talking about it. And so for me, inspiration was your question. I really want to be inspiring other people to do the same thing that I did, which was go seek help, find something that brings them joy, find out what works in your life, call your buddies, do all the things that we really need to be supporting each other and doing more of.
As a dad, entrepreneur, somebody that is just, I don't want to say busy, but busy. Uh, how do you go about finding balance? And then how did you turn around and decide I need to take care of my mental health and actually make time for that self-care? Because a lot of people feel like they don't have time to take care of themselves.
Well, I think there's a difference between being physically present and being present. And so I think before I was present physically, but I was not mentally present. And so I took a couple of people, my wife included, to say, "Hey, where are you right now? You're not here. You're here physically, but you're not mentally in this room with us." So, for me, it was making sure that I had the intention behind being there with the family. And so when I'm with my family, I try to be present. And I'm certainly not perfect in that, but I think intention is important. The other thing that worked for me is I'm not a morning person, despite what they do in the military. Like, I still don't like getting up in the morning, but that is what time works for me to get my physical fitness in. And I know that on days that I work out, I'm much more energetic. I'm much happier. I feel like I've accomplished something as soon as I wake up in the day. So that alarm clock goes off. I don't like it, but I get up and I work out because I know that that's when I have time to focus on that self-care that we talked about. So that was a really big thing for me, is making sure that I had time to do it, finding time that worked for my schedule. And then, when I am present, I'm actually present, not just physically present.
Yeah, it's so important to remember to prioritize that self-care, and not just trying to fit it in where it fits, but making that time. Like yourself, I actually prefer running into the evening, but I have to most days get up earlier than my day is going to start to get in that run or that workout. I can only imagine how difficult it is with 4 children as well to be present for them and also be present for yourself. Man, that's a tough journey you're on, and I commend you for making it happen.
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head, Danny, right? Like, I would much rather work out in the evening. That's before we had children. When I was in the military, I would work out after work whenever possible. And that just doesn't work. If I want to be able to get that in, it has to be in the morning. I get to see the kids for a little bit in the morning, but that's pretty chaotic, to be honest. Then you're working and you get to see them when they get home from school. And, I dedicate that time to being with them and being with the family. And then, we spend a little bit of time, on the business at nighttime. And then after that, we spend some time with the wife, so that, you have to figure out how you balance these things and what works for you. It's definitely not easy. And I would say that the other thing that's important is focus, right? You have to not, especially with entrepreneurship, everything can seem like a fire, right? And so, but not everything is. And so you have to really spend your energy where it's providing the most value. We talk about that team. How do you build out a team around you of people that are like-minded, that have the areas that you don't have strengths in covered, so that you can have that balance? But if you try to do everything alone, you're gonna struggle with that balance.
Yeah, I see a lot of entrepreneurs try to go it alone, or when they're building it in a silo, so that when it's time to transition or for the scaling to occur, they're actually really inexperienced with having a team that they're more so managing than doing it all themselves, because I mean, we can't do it all ourselves, or else we should just go get a job.
Absolutely.
Like that's what I tell people all the time. I'm like, do you want to work the business or do you want to grow the business? Because you can't do both.
Yeah, and it's easier to just work, right? It's easier to just do that because it feels like you need to do it right now. But you know, you have to figure out something to do for the long term. And I think that that's an efficiency play, right? Maybe you're going to sacrifice some short term things, but you're going to get a long term benefit. And you have to have the foresight and the planning and the strategy to know when you need to do that and what's most important for you to spend your time on. I think one of the questions that I get asked a lot when you're in these entrepreneurial circles is, how are you uniquely qualified to do what you're doing, right? And if you're uniquely qualified to do that thing, that's where you should be spending your time, not on all the things that you don't know how to do and you're not uniquely qualified to do. So build out your team, right? Find that support.
Yeah, that's so true. I wonder, Alan, do you, as an entrepreneur, especially in the early days, and even as we get deeper, and by early days, I mean the first 5 to 10 years, even, it's such a roller coaster. It's such a roller coaster of emotions. You're learning so much because you don't know what you don't know. New fires, as it were, come up, spring up, and we feel ill-equipped to deal with them. And I know for myself, I've had a lot of ups and downs of not necessarily wanting to quit, but just going, I don't know if I have what it takes to make this happen. And then we turn around and we experience a success, and we're just like, I'm the best freaking entrepreneur there's going to be, and we're gonna make our money, and we're gonna buy our house and take our vacations. And how do you manage that roller coaster of emotions yourself?
I don't think I have a really insightful answer for this one because I go through the roller coaster every day, and some days I'm like, what did I do? What are we doing right now? Because it's really, really hard. I think one thing that's really important is making sure you have a support structure around you. So, actually, not too long ago, my wife and I were talking. We were talking about a low point, right? And I was asking, why did we do this? Is it going to work? And she said, hey, these are the things that you need to be doing. This is how you need to spend your time. And she brought me back and gave me the encouragement that I needed. Similarly, right, I have friends that we talk through these things that are in similar positions. They know the ups and downs that you're going through. And so for me, I have a sounding board, right? I talk through things because when you say them out loud, sometimes they're not as bad as they seem. And so that's why you should be talking about these things. And those ups and down moments are not always as bad as you think they are. But it definitely takes the perseverance to continue to push forward. And I don't think, for me personally, I don't think if there was no mission behind this, I don't think I would be doing this, right? It had to be more than just, right, growing a business, making money, right? I had passion behind what we were doing. And I think that's really important too, because if you're not passionate about what you're trying to do, and it's really this hard, right? You have to think about why that's how you're spending your time and energy. And Danny, we just talked about balance, right? I'm still sacrificing time with my family and my kids to build this, right? And so it's a weight. It's a weight that you have to bear, and a balance to say, is this something that I'm willing to take some time away from them to dedicate to this for this mission, for the passion that I have? And if you can't answer that question, then you really need to ask yourself why you're trying to do the thing that you're trying to do.
It's so true. Making sure you're having a strong enough why, and then that team. A lot of people will put together their team of friends, of people that they've known for a long time. For you, how do you go about building out your team?
So for me, what I did was as I mentioned earlier, I was cold calling people, and I was trying to find people that had skills, experiences, personalities that were different than mine, right? I wanted somebody to challenge the way that we were thinking. I wanted people to add different inputs into what we were doing. And so I went outside of the people that I knew. I cold called anybody that I could find in the industry, anybody that I could find that could support this. And I looked for those types of experience rather than the people that were close to me. The people that are close to me, those are my sounding board, right? That's where I'm really talking about, hey, these are the personal struggles. This is how this is so difficult, and what thoughts do you have? But I tried to stay away from building that team of people that I knew, so that we could really focus on the mission, the building the brand, and the product in a really great way.
That's really awesome that you have those two different sounding boards and clarification once it makes it past the sounding board. I know for me, when I go out on a run, I never know what I'm going to return with. Sometimes it's a form of therapy that I was able to clear my mind or reduce some anxiety, boost my mood. But a lot of the times I come back and it's like I have a plethora of new ideas and I have to bounce it off of somebody, especially the ones that I remember when I get home. Um, has there been a time where you've gone out on a run and came back with an answer or a way forward or a new idea that you've had to screen before bringing it to your team?
Absolutely. I'll say two things about running. One is that I like to run with people a lot, right? So another thing that I've done is I've roped a lot of people into doing marathons that have never done marathons before, because I love for people to experience the joy of doing something they never thought that they were able to do. And I used my first experience of showing up to the marathon woefully underprepared. Like, look, if I could do it, I know you're going to prepare, so you can definitely do it. So I love to rope other people into doing these things. And, when I run with other people, it's a good way to get some time with people that are outside of your house, talking with other adults, your peers, your friends that are, outside of your work environment and your house. I think is another way that it also helps with me personally. Like, I like running with other people, but I don't always run with people. And when I'm running by myself, most of the time I'm not running with music. I'm just turning over ideas in my head. What's on my mind, right? And that's a time for me to clear my head, work out some things. If I'm going to be going to a pitch competition, or if I'm going to be doing, some new marketing ideas, I'll turn those over in my mind, because there's something that's meditative about running. When you get into the zone, that first mile or two is always tough, but once you get to around mile 3 and beyond, it gets to be meditative, and you get to be able to think and really work through things. And so I've used those runs to provide that mental clarity. And much like you said, Danny, I have a notes app. I get back and I'm like, all right, I got to write that down before I forget it, because that feeling is going to go away and I'm not going to know what I was thinking at that time. So I write it down when I get back.
Yeah, those running thoughts are always a little crazy and eye opening, at least for me. And it sounds like we've both experienced a lot of the mental and physical benefits of running. When you had said that you like to take people on their first marathon, and because they can experience the joy, and I was just like, I mean, I remember that first marathon, the pain post mile 20. But then the elation after mile 26, going, I'm going to finish this, and now I'm done. Regardless of the time, it is an accomplishment. And for others, these mental benefits and physical benefits can be some sort of other activity, but the importance is that they go forward, they go on, because unfortunately, like, there's still ongoing struggles and tragic suicide rates among service members, veterans, first responders. Alan, is there any message of hope that you have for someone that is currently battling?
So I think a lot of the things that we talked about, right, the ups and downs, I think it's really important to remember that not every day, not every moment is a down. And so you just need to get to the up, right? And I think that's really important to remember. I think the other thing that I would say is the stigma that's associated with, poor mental health, PTSD, anything that you want to name here, it needs to go away, right? There shouldn't be a stigma around it. We need to talk about it. And so I would say there is more people talking about it. We're getting more people talking about it. For me personally, it took me a long time to do it, but I eventually did. And I did because somebody else just made an offhand comment like, oh, why don't you go to the VA? And I was like, oh, that person that I respect a lot said I should do that. And they didn't even think anything of it, right? But it was very impactful for me, which is why it's so important for us, as members of this community, that we're talking about it, because you don't know the impact that your words will have on somebody that may be struggling. So I think that's the beacon of hope that I have, is that by talking about it, by getting the message out there, we inspire one person. We've done a really tremendous thing.
That's so true. And I love all the marketing that you guys do currently put out, because this does stand first and forefront in in your messaging and what you aspire to do. And with that, where can people find and connect with you and Go Faster?
So website is gofasterathletic.com. If you want to follow our socials, Instagram is gofaster_official. My personal Instagram is Alan Parvis. I'm new to social media. I have been off social media for way long time, but I got back on so that I could start sharing this message with everybody. So please connect with me.
Well, thank you so much, Alan, for taking the time to be with us here on the 1 Mile, 1 Veteran podcast.
Thanks for having me, Danny.
And for our listeners, please remember you can also catch the 1 Mile, 1 Veteran podcast on Reese Across America Radio, available on platforms like iHeartRadio, Odyssey, and the TuneIn app.